The best thing that I can share with people is that there will be ups and downs. You will fall. I've fallen a million times. I've started 35 businesses. I've been rejected a million times. But that built my resiliency. That built my armor. And so it's that building of that resiliency, building of that being proactive rather than reactive. Okay, I know that there will be ups and downs. So when the downs come, it's not like, what do I do? I can't believe I'm a failure. It's okay, how do I pivot? What can I do differently?
All right, hello and welcome back to the Better Human podcast, a podcast about making humans better humans and demystifying the world of relationships, communication, entrepreneurship for your better life. Today, we're joined by the one and only Raia, popularly known as Coach Carey. She is a 3-time certified life coach, which I want to find out more about. You're a keynote speaker that just drops amazing bombs and a corporate diversity and inclusion consultant. And in fact, now you're actually working with Sick Kids Foundation as the diversity and inclusion and culture manager, which is a very important topic and conversation for us to be having. She's passionate about encouraging others to tap into their confidence. In fact, we got to know each other in that conversation or that topic, which is all about really helping people discover their motivation, and more than that, discovering their confidence so they can do the things they need to do. You are the creator of what is called the Confidence Talk that has allowed her or you to provide corporate wellness workshops to some of the biggest organizations in the world, like LinkedIn, Royal Bank of Canada, Soho House, which I'm a member at, which in fact I need to renew that membership, etc., and many more. Let's start the conversation by jumping right on in, where we get to know Carey a little bit more in what we call the impact session. Carey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's honestly a pleasure to be here. And I'm just fired up by you. And it's always great to connect with like-minded people. So big shout out to Laia for connecting us.
Amazing. So on that note, one of the things we love to do is, as you said, talk to like-minded people. You are a wicked coach. You're killing it in the industry. You're helping people be better than better selves. This show is about being better humans. And we just want to find out a little more about sort of where you come from, how did you get to where you are, and get some of your, as we said earlier, gems. So let me start the question with, how did you end up in the profession? How did you end up becoming a coach? Where did this all begin?
Yeah, I mean, how far back do we want to go? Because for me, I feel like there's so many little points throughout my life that led me to this journey. So maybe I won't go too far back, but what I will share is this has sort of been a journey I've been on my whole life and I didn't know. When people speak about life purpose, this absolutely is my life's purpose, but I wasn't aware of it. And so I want to take you through a couple little big pillars throughout my life that really brought me to here we are and to where we are now. And I always like to start with grade 4. Now, prior to grade 4, I was bullied. I became the bully. I had the mentality of let me hurt them before they hurt me. And that didn't work so well. I didn't make any friends. And as you can tell from my energy and my vibe, I love making friends. So then grade 4 is...
It's hard to imagine you as the bully, but I appreciate how sometimes life puts us in a situation where you learn how to sort of attack before being attacked.
Absolutely. Common mentality for anyone who's been bullied probably, right?
Right.
And as luck would have it, I changed schools in grade 4. So I always share this because I truly feel it was the day that changed the entire trajectory of my whole life. And I walk into the classroom in grade 4 and I'm the only new kid. I'm the only fat kid. I'm the only person of color. So everyone's making fun of me, snickering, laughing, pointing at me. And I barely make it through the attendance. And I go to the washroom and I bawl my eyes out. And somehow in that moment, I was able to sort of access my higher self. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and saying, you've done this before. You'll do this again. You have friends. So I wiped my tears and I head back to the classroom on a mission. And I kept thinking to myself, what is it that I can do differently? I've been bullied. I've been the bully. What is it that I can do differently? And on my way to the classroom, it hit me. And I went around the room and introduced myself to every single kid, learned their name and something about them. And obviously I was only in grade 4, so I didn't really understand what I was onto, but I knew I was onto something. I had disarmed them. I had taken away their preconceived notions. And that is still something that I do to this day in every room I enter. And that was really the beginning of my toolbox, the beginning of that self-care, that confidence from within, that coming from my higher self. And I carry that with me everywhere I go. And then from grade 4 to grade 10, I switched schools about 5 more times. So within that period, I'm building my resiliency.
Right. So just quickly, just to interrupt, what was the reason you were changing school so much?
Yeah, a variety of reasons. Troublemaker, School ended.
Mm-hmm.
I was at an all-girls school at one point and didn't feel aligned because we'll talk about that later, but I more so identify with a hybrid.
Right.
Yeah, and then that brought me to grade 10.
Okay.
And first day of grade 10, I walk in. I'm also over 600 pounds at this point, and everyone thought I was going to be bullied. My parents, friends, I did. But I walked in and I was like, I got my tool. So boom, first day of grade 10, I'm the only new kid, the only fat kid, the only person of color once again. But I walked into the room and I introduced myself to every single kid, learned their name and something about them. And this is what really started to shape things. I went on to university and college, etc. And I did events for 10 years. I threw parties, and that was fun. I started in university when I lived in Montreal. So anyone who's been in Montreal knows that Montreal's, pretty big on the events and frosh.
Is that where you were, McGill?
No, I was at Concordia.
Oh, yeah, even worse, right?
Yeah.
Worse in a good way, meaning like
party. Yeah. I knew what you meant. I rebelled and didn't apply to McGill because my older sister went there. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the other one, and that was a lot of fun, and I loved bringing people together. But at age 27, I started to feel really unfulfilled. What am I doing? I know that I'm destined for more. I know that I can, and I wasn't being challenged. I wasn't growing. So then I went back to the drawing board and I heard about coaching, and I was like, okay, this kind of sounds like me. I majored in psychology in university because I've always been passionate about why people do the things they do cognitively. And then boom, I called all this coaching schools, and it just felt like it aligned. And it felt like all the little dots throughout my life were brought me to this, the pièce de résistance, as they would say in French. And that was 8 years ago, and I haven't looked back. And that was truly, how I got here in hopefully not too long of a story.
That's a great story. You know what was so amazing about listening to your story was, at 9 years old, you have this intrapersonal awareness, this ability to think, hold on a second, what do I want? Right? Because, we are driven in emotion. And at 9 years old, after going through that experience, we might argue that the executive function of your brain isn't operating at the best of times at that age, but like, you could just imagine that peer pressure. And, let me ask you, were you ever taught that? Were you ever taught the skill of introducing yourself? Were you just sort of, groomed? Like, was this mom, like, where did you pick that up?
I'm telling you, I don't know. I definitely wasn't taught it. It wasn't something that was even, talking about emotions was super seldom back then as well, taking it back to the early 90s, late 80s. So that's why my mom would always say to me that she would always say, you're consciously aware. I didn't know what that meant in grade 2. But she told me that after I told her about something that happened on the playground, and all the kids were fighting over the toys and stuff. And I just became the playground mediator. And then whenever there was a dispute over a toy or a ball or a slide, the kids would come to me rather than the teachers.
But you, by definition, are it. You are conscious. You are consciously aware. You consciously communicate. You're consciously showing up. And look, you're in the industry, so am I. This is what we're trying to teach people to do. Whether you're a leader or whether you're sort of thinking about yourself and your own developments and your goals and stuff, it's about sort of that consciousness. So, man, that's amazing. All right, so let me ask you this: who have been some influential people in your life? Sounds like you might put yourself on that list there, but who else has been influential for you?
Of course. Great question. Obviously my parents, both great leaders and role models.
What did they do, by the way?
Yeah. So my mom has been she was president of the Ontario Black History Society for over 25 years.
Wow.
And she was a catalyst in making Black history recognized in Canada. She's the one who basically passed the baton to Jean Augustine, who was the first woman in Parliament to be able to get Black History Month in Canada as we know it now. And my father is an optometrist from Bermuda, and he moved here for school, and they met at the library.
Wow, what great parents to come from. This is maybe where you get it. Maybe it's genetic.
Yeah, a little bit for sure. And some other role models, Maya Angelou. I love the way her outlook on life, something that I say to myself still to this day is still I rise. because for me, it's fall down 9 times, but get up 10. And when I say that to myself, that's what I'm embodying. That's what I'm feeling. I've looked up to Brendan Bouchard. I love his approach to high performance achievement, and just his tactical approach really resonates with me. And, I think a lot of the leaders in the space before it was recognized, I don't necessarily love everything Tony Robbins has done, but I absolutely respect him for making coaching a household name prior to anyone recognizing what it was.
1,000%. Whether you like him, whether you don't like him, first you got to acknowledge the work that he does, which is actually
100%
impactful. And two, he's been a driver in the industry, right? Made coaching modern. So very cool. Okay, so all right, so let's get into some other stuff here. So tell me about some of the things that maybe you wish you. Well, let's back up. What is a 3-time certified life coach? What is that?
Great question. So it means that I have 3 different certifications in coaching. So one is basically my one-on-one coaching. That was with IPEC, the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching. And then my second one is sort of life skills coaching, more group coaching, more workshops. And that was with George Brown College. And then my third one was cognitive behavioral coaching, which was also at George Brown College, because I'm a firm believer that there is always more to learn. And for the first time in my life, when I started to learn about coaching, school made sense to me. Prior to that, I didn't like school. I didn't like homework. I didn't like the idea of being judged off of a 50 multiple choice test. But then when I got to coaching, I felt like, whoa, okay, I can do this. So then I was fired up about it. So I wanted to continue to get more certifications so I could not only better myself, but be better for my clients.
Very cool. I was similar to that. I hated school until I fell into the industry. And it was only through the learning of coaching and a number of other things, well, the psychology, that I've actually really enjoyed learning, right? Or crave it. So tell me a little bit about your psychology experience. How much do you think that learning of psychology has contributed to you doing or being very successful in helping people create breakthroughs in their own goals and success when coaching? Like the marriage of both, the fact that you've got this insight from the psychology, plus you've actually been skilled and trained in how to, from an art standpoint, coach and move people. Do you think that's an important marriage and blend?
I think it's a great marriage. I don't think it's something that is absolutely required, but I definitely think it felt like a really nice prerequisite for myself, because I already had sort of that foundational understanding of behaviors, of patterns, and that allows a coach to kind of support their client that much better, because the moment they might say A, B, I know how to get to C faster than perhaps someone who's just starting out as a coach.
What advice would you give people if they're going out and looking for a coach?
That's a great way to reframe it, because it's not about, talking poorly about people, right? But it's about giving the people the info who might be looking to get a coach. So my biggest thing is, number one, just ensure that person is certified.
Right.
The number one trend that I've seen is that anyone and everyone now has decided that they want to call themselves a coach.
Right.
And I have all love for people who are doing good work and supporting people, of course. But there is a thin line, because imagine that person is trying to support someone and it's not the right kind of support that is hindering the industry, that is potentially harmful to that person.
Yeah.
And, if we step back and look at things objectively, if someone was pretending to be a doctor or a lawyer, they would go to jail. Coaching isn't regulated that much yet, so everybody can moonlight as one. So I would say the number one thing is make sure that person is certified. Take them up on, most coaches will offer complimentary consultations. So take them up on that, so you can have the call and really see if you connect with that person and that person's approach resonates for you. And the third, I would say, be clear on what kind of coach you're looking for, because now that everyone has dropped trainer, consultant, and all the other words to add coach, okay, but does that mean they're a life coach? Because being a certified life coach is completely different than someone saying, hey, I'm a business expert, but I've dropped expert and now a coach. That's great. That means you're talking specifically from experience. but that does not mean that you have the methodologies and practices to coach someone on their thought patterns and behavior. You're coaching them based off of experience of how to build a business because that's your expertise. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to flip that and say to anyone who is out there and calling themselves a coach, be clear that you are not a certified coach. Be clear and say, hey, I can help you with business coaching because that is my expertise.
Right. Right.
That way, I think that'll alleviate a lot of discrepancies, confusion, and on both ends.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, let's jump into some fun ones. I want to get to know you a little more. So obviously, you're amazing. You're amazing at what you do as a coach in D&I and for your clients. What have you fucked up with? Like, where have been some of your fuck ups in your career? We could even sort of, make this more coaching, which is, what are some of the memorable fuck ups that you've gone through, which have catapulted you to be more successful today, either because it was a valuable lesson that you learned, or it was the experience that sort of moved you into a certain direction?
The biggest one would be, for me personally, was dancing around figuring out my niche. I just wanted to help everybody. So I was like, I can coach everybody and anybody and anyone who makes it, potentially everybody come to me, which, could have potentially hindered me for sure. But the confusion was I wasn't able to kind of laser focus on my target demographic and people showing up to me for my expertise. So that meant I was getting a lot of okays and maybes and not committed and stuff like that. So as a result of that, after like a year or so of doing that, and I was still getting clients, which was great, but it didn't feel fully aligned. So about a year and a half after just doing one-on-one sessions with anyone and everyone, I really got back to the drawing board to figure out what my niche was. And I had to step back and think, okay, what is it specifically that is drawing the clients that I feel most aligned with to me? And what I realized was the underlining tone was always confidence. So then I said, okay, let's try that for my niche. And then here we are. Never looked back. So for me, it was being scared to kind of cast a smaller net in fear of losing more clients. But it was actually the smaller net that got me larger clients, more clients, consistent clients. And then I would say my second one, not necessarily having a mentor at the time. I was so go. I got this, and I kind of missed an opportunity to maybe do things faster, sooner, and run my business more smoothly. But again, all things that helped me learn and grow. So
Right. So in some regards, like if you didn't actually go through that fuck up, through that stumble, let's say, you might have still just been sort of, casting a wide net for coaching and trying to help a little too much. And you strike me as a soul that, is driven by helping people. Like you get energy from people's happiness and excitement and support. And in some cases, you would have done yourself the greatest injustice because you wouldn't have been able to help as many people as you are able to, because we were trying to be everything for everyone. And I think that's great advice for all of us, which is, in our effort to be great, we sometimes try to be great for everyone. We need to really, I love the line that you use, which is be laser focused. And I think that's also a healthy exercise to have in relationships, to have in goals, to have in certain sort of business objectives, which is to put that focus and to drive toward. Otherwise, and there's that wonderful saying, you're throwing a bunch of shit up against the wall and hoping it sticks.
Exactly.
Right? Like wildfire, it's spreading. I love that whole sort of, we'll use the word reframing, how you reframe that, which is, and it switches your mindset, right? Which is, it's one thing, using the word inclusion and then speaking and using words that are opposite to that, right? Which is, I'm going to call that person out. Oh, it's by definition breaking the rules of what we just did. Okay, Carey, this is awesome. We're going to take a quick little break. We're going to hear from our sponsor, and we're going to jump into the next next section, which is the deep dive. We're going to get all those gems I've been telling you or asking you about. which is how do we set goals? How do we remain laser focused? What are some best practices? All that kind of good stuff. Okay, just before we jump into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little audio break and we're going to hear from our sponsor, the Better Human Program. The Better Human Program is a 10-week program that equips you with the tools to achieve success in every interaction with other humans. Learn assertiveness, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and take control of your life with the Better Human Program. Check out the link below for all the description information. Okay, we're back here at the deep dive section. We're going to talk to Coach Carey a little more, and we're going to get some of those gems we've been talking about. So let me kick things off. Carey, goals, objectives, being visionary, very important tools for us as individuals. It helps with mindset. It helps us sort of, in some cases, distract us from all the negativity. What are some best practices, or what are some ways we could go about running that exercise? I mean, what do you do with some of your clients, or what are some of the things that you do in order to create healthy goals and objectives? How do you stay so visionary?
The two top things that I work on for myself as well as my clients is, number one, attainable goals. Because oftentimes we want to make these big goals, which is great. I'm all about dreaming big. But then we have to break that down into small bite-sized pieces so that we bring ourselves into a place of momentum. Because, human behavior, if you set a new goal and then you try it and then you don't do it, you're kind of like, okay, now that I'm over that goal for the next 6 months. For example, if someone said, okay, I want to win the lottery by tomorrow. Not necessarily realistic, but what I'm hearing you say is you'd like to create more abundance for yourself. Okay. So what about trying to save $100 extra a month? That seems potentially manageable for someone. And then by 3 months of saving $100, that person might be able to say, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll save $150 now. And they move into a place of momentum. So number one is attainable goals, realistic goals, and small steps. And then the second thing that I like to talk about a lot is self-inventory. Because we're so busy. We're moving and grooving. We're not necessarily stopping to ask ourselves a lot of those important questions to see how we are doing. I call it self-inventory because it's like, well, at this age, after our, let's say 18 or sooner, it's no one else's responsibility to manage, track our self-development, our self-growth. It's not your partners, it's not your friends, it's not really your parents anymore. It's up to us. And if you don't take self-inventory, how will you know? We're leaving things up to chance. So when I like to say self-inventory, as I always say, ask yourself 4 questions for a couple of nights a week for 2 weeks, so you can really see what's going on for yourself. And then you can kind of get back to moving and grooving and maybe only do this exercise again, every couple of months. For me, I usually do it for myself about once a month.
Okay, and what are those 4 questions?
Question number 1 is, what worked well for me today? Question number 2 is, what did not work well? Question number 3 is, what drained me? And question number 4 is, what fueled me? So that way, after 2 weeks, you can see what patterns are showing up for you. And then you're like, oh, every time I talk to this person, I feel drained. Boom, next week, don't talk to that person as much. Implement some boundaries.
That easy. I mean, this is where we're floating into the conversation of toxic relationships and people, which is, people have a difficult time. I often, give the analogy or the example. Toxic relationships are like bubble gum stuck to your shoe. Like you step in. I saw you take the sip of water. I'm like, maybe I should wait. Right. So it's like bubble gum that's stuck to your shoe. So you step in it and like, and you got to scrape it off, but like it's messy and it's dirty sometimes. So, on that note, let's say one of those things is to start to pay, like the inventory is to start to acknowledge that some of these relationships I'm around, what would be some ways for me to set some healthy boundaries, not on them, but on myself?
But I think for that, we have to go one step further. Because if someone is going to implement boundaries, that can be difficult because usually the people who are impacted the most by boundaries respond negatively. You are shifting how you could have always showed up with that person. And depending on where that person is with their own self, they may not be, as supportive as we would hope.
Right.
So when we break that down, it's really, do you trust yourself? Can you honor yourself? Because then When that person potentially responds negatively, you're going to stand your ground, because normally when that happens and they respond negatively, we're like, whoa, okay, I don't want this friction. No problem. Never mind. But if we stand our ground, the people who are meant to be in our lives, the people who honor us and support us and are actually there and want the best for us, will take some time to figure it out or get it right away.
So on that note, you spoke about sort of taking inventory, which I think is a really healthy exercise. In fact, it can relate to Jordan B. Peterson. He runs a program which is called is it self-authoring? Yeah, which is very much around taking inventory. It's much more psychological and clinical, and that's not for everyone. And that's where, like, I love your four questions, which is, these are four simple questions for me to use. And I love what you said. Don't do it every day. Do it twice a week, right? Sometimes every day. And I love what you said as well, which is, it's all about, I use the word micro wins. Right? Stop looking for these massive, like, I'm going to this. Well, micro win number one, start. That might be micro win number two, schedule, time, etc., etc., etc. So I want to ask around the exercise of gratitude. You strike me as an individual that knows the exercise well. Is that a healthy exercise for us to be doing? Gratitude exercises, gratitude journaling as part of self-inventory?
Absolutely think so. I mean, I think gratitude has so many more benefits than we all realize. I think a lot of people that came before us recognized it, and it's sort of like was like broken telephone from generation to generation. We didn't really get the memo, but now we're starting to get the memo. And I really think it is a way for you to just understand and accept and embrace where you are, what you have. You know, social media has made us in a place of comparison and what about that person? And I should be doing this. And it's like, gratitude is for me, as a tool that I use to ground myself.
Right.
And my favorite example of gratitude was when I was doing a workshop for a bunch of grade fours. And this little boy put up his hand to me and said, I have something I'm grateful for. And I said, amazing. Tell me what that is. And he said, I'm grateful for doors. And everyone kind of laughed. And I said, okay, well, tell me why you're grateful for doors. And he goes, because they keep my sisters out of my room. And I said, oh, this kid gets it. You know why? Because never until that day did I ever think about having gratitude for doors.
I think what the message was my own, I need my own space.
That's right. When he decides he would like his own space. So, you know, and breaking it down to the things that are important for you. Now, not one other person understood that until he explained it. And then I thought about, wow, noise cancellation, privacy, safety for many. You know, there's so now I have gratitude for doors. Grade 4 taught me that, right? So for me, I'm the kind of person who starts my day every day with a hot shower. That is how I end up with the cold 30 seconds at the end. Like for me, that's like, brain, time to start your day. Let's get going. But I recognize that not everyone has access to a hot shower. And so right away when I start my day, I'm starting from a place of gratitude. And that absolutely shapes my day. And it also allows you to be more grounded throughout the day. For example, if someone sends a passive aggressive email, instead of me being like, wow, I'm so affected and mad and angry, let me send them an email back. Instead, I'm like, wonder what they were going through today. And then it shifts how I show up.
Yeah, it takes a higher, as you said, higher level of consciousness and a higher level self to be able to operate that way, right? So how do you deal with your emotions? I mean, you get a passive aggressive email from someone. Yeah, on a good day, you think gratitude, you know, or you think let me rise above this. But do you ever find yourself battling, and if so, in those times, battling with emotions, and if so, in those times, what are some of the things you lean on to maybe pull you out of that hole?
Great question. Yeah, realistically, just because we are coaches, just because we know this stuff doesn't mean that we're not human. You know, we have ups and downs like anybody else. But I would say that number one thing is that I know what works for me. I know that when I'm feeling like this, I know I have my contingency plan for every emotion. So rather than potentially turning to my vices or scrambling or just saying, you know, throwing my hands up in the air, I go, oh, when I'm feeling mad, I listen to music, or when I'm feeling sad, I call my best friend because we laughed the whole time. I have the little things that I know refuel me in those moments. Also, specifically when it comes to my professional life, I don't respond to anything if I recognize I'm in emotion. I'll take a break, go for a walk, whatever it is, but I am never going to allow someone to bring me down to a place where I am not showing up at my best, because then who wins? Exactly.
Yep.
And I think there's an extra level when we're talking about D&I of a Black woman coming across angry in an email always lands more intensely than someone else. So I often have that in the back of my mind, unfortunately, like I'm sure many people of color do. So I always try to come from a place of love, my higher self, and logic. Even if I have to take 3 days before I respond to that email, I will.
If you were interviewing me and you said, what's your biggest fuck up? I would have said my emotions getting the better of me, even though I know that it shouldn't, because I've in business, in my personal life, as a parent, as a friend, as a person walking around this planet, as someone that drives a car, I'm aggressive, so my emotion is fire. That's what I work. I work at that every day. That's my task. So how do well, let's say I have a lower self-esteem. What are some ways, what are some things, what are some tools that I might be able to use to help build my self-esteem, build my confidence?
I honestly, it's interesting that I usually recommend those 4 questions, because people often don't realize that building a foundation of you understanding yourself is usually step 1 in confidence. And then I usually say step 2 is creating your boundaries. And then step 3 is trusting yourself. Because then confidence can start seeping in from all areas, right? Because there's so many things that can attribute to someone's confidence. But if you don't have your foundation, right, it's constantly going to be shifted and impacted by others. You're constantly going to be dimming your light to allow others to shine, things like that. Not speaking up when you know something, right? So those are usually my top 3. And that can start building the foundation so that you can feel at your best.
So is self-esteem and confidence an outcome of these exercises and actions? Or do I need to, is it like the chicken and the egg? Do I need to feel a little bit confident in order to use this? Or by doing these things, I end up with the result of feeling confident?
For this specifically, there's maybe that tiny, tiny, tiny space in between chicken and egg, and that is contemplation. Has that person ever thought about what it would be like to be confident? Has that person ever felt what it's like to be confident? And one of my favorite questions for clients is, okay, name a time where you felt most confident.
What's the most common answer you get to that, by the way?
The most common answer is people don't remember.
Mm.
And then a week later or so, they'll come back. And then I go, great. What are some things that you can bring from there into now?
So why do you think people don't remember that? I mean, it's such an important part of life, these moments that build us. Why do you think we as people maybe, I don't know, forget them?
Well, one, depends on where that person is, right? For someone who's a high achiever or consciously aware or passionate about self-development, those are the people who typically remember. For everyone else, it's kind of like, okay, kids, career, societal norms, finances, etc. So hobbies, confidence, the other things absolutely get thrown to the back burner, unfortunately. And also people don't, because they haven't consistently been doing their self-inventory, they just kept moving and grooving, unfortunately.
I love your self-inventory. You keep coming back to it. It's such a core piece. It's amazing.
It really is, yeah.
You might have answered this already with your self-inventory, but you've had a life-changing transformation. I mean, you mentioned you were over 600 pounds. You have physically transformed, you've emotionally transformed, you've professionally transformed. How can others build the mindset that keeps them on course? I mean, I would still say that you are still on course today.
Such a tricky one because everybody is different, and what worked for me may not work for others. But I think the best thing that I can share with people is that there will be ups and downs. You will fall. I've fallen a million times. I've started 35 businesses. I've been rejected a million times. But that built my resiliency. That built my armor. So just like in grade 4, that same resiliency that I built from grade 4 to grade 10, being the new kid, boom, 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 boom. So when I walked into the classroom in grade 10, I wasn't scared. I was like, oh yeah, I know what to do. And so it's that building of that resiliency, building of that being proactive rather than reactive. Okay, I know that there will be ups and downs. So when the downs come, it's not like, what do I do? I can't believe I'm a failure. It's okay, how do I pivot? What can I do differently? We can't tell anyone how to magically be successful or magically manage their mindset. But what we can do is give people some tips and tools and hope that it'll be thought-provoking enough that they'll create what's best for them, because ultimately, as long as it's not hurting anybody or themselves, that's what's most important.
So what do you think the challenge is with people in resilience today? I hear corporately. I get clients saying, can you come teach my Salesforce how to be resilient? I'm like, you want me to work with your 100 salespeople on how to be resilient? And I have this moment of like, is this a check the box exercise for you? Or does your team need to feel stronger and more confident and more resilient? Kids, they need to be more resilient. The younger generation, they need to be more resilient. Like, you hear the word resilient is being thrown around left, right, and center.
In my opinion, it's really come down to social media and comparisons. And every single person is striving towards something that may not align with who they are. And so then when you get knocked down or you fall or you get rejected or talked too poorly or you're triggered, rather than rising, people fall.
Right.
And then when you're accustomed to falling, some people can't even fathom rising. Some people can't even fathom getting up 9 times. And we've really done the next generation a disservice by not teaching them life skills in school. Even my generation, we all were like, cool, we have grade 12, math, but we've never had to use it. I would have loved a class on life skills or taxes or emotions.
So on that note, what advice would you give young individuals who are facing a lack of confidence due to social media and society and school? And I mean, parents aren't doing it. What advice would you give?
There's so many things. Number one, I think for the first time in our history, emotional intelligence has been proven to be that much more valuable than IQ. And that just goes to show us how we weren't focusing on all the things in the past. So my advice is really, one, to parents. Because if we want to have kids be a certain way or to learn, we have to lead by example. And one thing that I always say when I'm coaching parents is, whatever thing I suggest or encourage or support you in doing, if you're doing it with your kids, parents have to go first. The children need to see their parents moving through emotion, apologizing, going through, oh, you're human too, or, oh, because, my generation and perhaps yours, parents are superheroes. They can't do anything wrong. And that messed us all up, because then you turn 20 and you're like, holy crap, you're not perfect.
You're totally fucked up.
Yeah. And now I'm mad. And then we don't talk for 6 months. And then I'm like, oh crap. Okay. You have stuff and trauma that you probably have never dealt with because no one encouraged you to do so. So that's one bucket.
That's the next show we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'm ready, because that's a big one. And then the next bucket is to talk to your kids like they are just another adult in the room, obviously within reason and age appropriate-ish, but they get things so much more than we do, to be honest with you. Anytime, like for all my friends' kids, I'm the person who teaches them about gender, because kids go, hey, you're a girl, but you dress like a boy. Why? Or, hey, you kind of look like a boy. And I'm like, you're so observant. I love that. And I was like, but I can be however I want. I like to be called a girl, but sometimes I like to dress like this. And then they'll say, oh, okay. And I'm like, well, you're a boy and you're wearing shirts and pants. And they go, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I'm wearing a shirt and pants. They're wearing a shirt and pants. Do girls wear shirts and pants? And they go, yeah. Okay. So it's just shirt and pants. And they're like, okay, cool. Easy. Done. When I try to explain that to parents or adults in the past, the world has changed a lot, thankfully, but that was like the most complex thing. That was bigger than the largest math equation they've ever seen.
At the end of the day, it's less about diversity and inclusion and more about sort of managing those sort of stereotypes, those again unconscious biases, the whole world of perception and conditioning and environment. And anyway, I don't want to go down that road. That's your domain.
Another time.
Okay, so I got one more question before we take a quick break, which is around stress. I believe stress is really good for us. I believe the right amount of stress, as you said, is going to build resilience. Some people shatter around stress, but stress is getting the better of us. We're living in, as you said, COVID times. Change is going through. We're living in a world of diversity and inclusion. We're surrounded by stress. Leaders were stressed. Parents were stressed. Kids are stressed, right? My daughter didn't want to get dressed for school today. I understand the stress. I didn't want to get dressed for work. I know. Right? So how can we build a better mindset to help us sort of transform our lives and deal with that stress?
Great question. Are you familiar with Dr. Lazaros's theory on stress?
No. Walk me through.
So a great psychologist who basically broke it down of how each person can perceive stress. And he breaks it down sort of as a stimuli, response, primary response, secondary response, action. And depending on someone's life experience, they're going to respond differently. So in that primary, it's going danger, irrelevant, or important. And so depending on your life experience.
I have heard of this, but keep going. So just walk me through it.
Depending on your life experience, something might be deemed dangerous to you, might be deemed irrelevant. It's going to be different for each person. And then when you pair that with how he talks about it, I agree with you because stress can benefit people, but it has to be in balance, all things in balance. And I always like to describe it as sort of a pendulum. So on one end, we have stress and it's like powerful and it's studying for an exam the night before and you're fired up and you crushed 8 hours. Like, okay. And then over here, we have kind of in the middle where you're doing okay. And then over here, it's the laziness, it's the lethargic, I can't really get out of bed. So there will always be both sides, but the idea is to kind of keep it in the middle. And when you know that it is, and then the last part, so 3 parts to this answer, the last part is there was a huge study done and the people who thought stress was bad for them, it impacted them more negatively based off of that one process going through the brain.
That one mindset, that one perception that became the governing rule, the thing that we checked against every.
That's right. That limiting belief. And so what researchers found was that stress actually can mimic the same feeling as joy and courage. Your heart starts racing, etc. So if we look at it as a positive, I'm fired up, I'm passionate, I'm excited, then we shift how stress actually impacts us. Don't get me wrong, there is stress and there can be ups and downs, but I think if we can have that be a pillar of, okay, I'm feeling stressed out because I care about this. I'm feeling stressed out because I want to do well at my job and I don't want to miss a deadline. That completely shifts. And then your heart is still pumping, but it's pumping without it being elevated, which can, clog arteries, but it can still be, so it can actually be better for you, for your health.
I often say anxiety and excitement are the same emotion. It just has a different perception of the consequence.
100%. And a different signal to the brain depending on that person's lived experience.
Right. I love that phase 1, phase 2 that you spoke about. That was really interesting. Thank you for that. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to get to the final section, which is the Better Human section, which is around better human takeaways. And just before we do that, we're going to hear from our sponsor. Okay, just before we jump into the next segment, we're going to take a quick little audio break and we're going to hear from our sponsor, the Better Human program. The Better Human program is a 10-week program that equips you with the tools to achieve success in every interaction with other humans. Learn assertiveness, effective communication, interpersonal skills, and take control of your life with the Better Human program. Check out the link below for all the description information. Okay, welcome back to the third section, the final section, the Better Human Takeaway. We got 3 questions that we're going to ask Coach Carey today. Coach Carey, this has been an amazing conversation. You are an inspiration. You have got some solid advice and pieces. I mean, I could talk to you for the next 10 hours, but that would just be selfish. So let me start with the first question I like to kick things off with in the final part, which is, what is the question I should have asked you today that I did not ask you today?
You crushed it. You asked everything that I would have liked for you to ask. Yeah.
Amazing.
Because the number one question, if someone else had asked me that, I think the number one question that people don't often ask is like a genuine, how are you?
Okay, so this show's about the program and the training, the company, the podcast. Everything's about sort of making humans better humans. So what does the word better human mean to you, and how do we achieve this?
To me, better human means striving to consistently be a better version of myself than I was yesterday. Because the only competition and person that we really should be comparing ourselves to is our own selves. There's so many things that we could do to achieve that, but I often say to my clients, just ask yourself, what is within my control? And I think if we bring that question into a lot of situations within our lives, we are consistently able to come from our higher selves and be our best selves, because we're so quick to blame and point fingers and external this and external that. But if we just pause and say, okay, what is it that I can do? What is it that I'm doing? How am I contributing? You know, even if we're using the passive aggressive email example, okay, did you send a passive aggressive email to begin with? You know, which then kind of allows someone to consistently challenge themselves, consistently reframe, and consistently center. So I think for each person, it's going to be different, but I think really taking the time to understand what your values are and consistently, radically, no holding back, stick to those values can allow each person to be their best selves.
Cool. And that takes responsibility.
100%.
Awesome. All right. At the end of each episode, we like to ask our guests for a better human takeaway, a 1 or 2 line piece of advice, a sort of a big learning from today's discussion. What's your better human takeaway for our audience today?
Woo! I mean, we were on fire today, so I don't know.
So maybe it was I'll change the question. We spoke about a lot today. You dropped amazing bombs and gems as we described. What was one thing we maybe want to go back to, which was like, this was an important thing to remember. We spoke about it, and just remember, this is something that we should pay special attention to.
Yeah, I would say maybe 3 pillars. Number 1 would be for sure the self-care questions, because it's accessible to every single person in this world. Even if you only answer with 1 word, it can still be enough to start that self-inventory. What worked well for me today? What did not work well? What drained me? What fueled me? The second thing I would say is implementing, setting, creating, maintaining your own boundaries, because those are so important, because they allow you to learn how to respect yourself, but maybe even more importantly, teach others how to respect you. And then I think the third pillar that doesn't get talked about enough is that a big portion of how stress impacts you is how you see it and how you think of it.
Carey, Coach Carey, Raia, all of the above. Every once in a while, the world is blessed with amazing human beings and better human. You are one of them. The work you do is important. I would describe you as a unicorn. You are one of the unique, special souls out there that actually is not just the right soul and the energy to do it, but the talent and the experience and the expertise behind it as well. So
thank you. That really, really means a lot, especially coming from you, a leader in the industry, paved the way for a lot of us. So, we're trying to catch up. I gotcha. And now I'm excited to learn more from you.
Well, we're going to talk about that after, but let's just, where can the listeners find you? If they want to reach out to you, if they want to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Great question. So Instagram is probably my biggest platform. I'm on a lot. So at coach.carey, Carey spelled Carey, which is my last name. And then as well, I'm on LinkedIn, my website, and soon, very, very more to come. So look out for all that.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait to see your online program and your books and your authoring and all the stuff that's coming out, because I know it is. And I'm going to be the first to buy it and the first to promote it. So
yes.
Thank you for being you, and thank you for being a part of the show, and thank you for sharing what you do and giving the advice. This is an amazing episode, and I know the audience is going to be a better human from just being able to listen to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. If you like today's episode, don't forget to click that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to comment. And don't forget to reach out to Coach Carey anytime you need some life inspiration and a little bit of confidence. We will see you next time. Hey, I'm Greg Witz. Thanks so much for coming and checking out the video. If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. So I'd highly suggest that you click this video over here. And don't forget to subscribe and share.